Dear friends, now we have already seen what is forecasting. Now let's talk about two different topics. One is planning horizons in the demand forecasting, and second is what are the different forecasting methods. So first is planning horizons in demand forecasting. So what is forecast horizon? So forecast horizon is the length of the time in a future or a future period for which forecasts are prepared. Now there are three types of planning horizons usually done in the demand forecasting. So the first is short-term forecast, second is mid-term forecast, and third is long-term forecast. Now name itself suggests short-term is basically for up to 3 months in a future. Mid-terms are basically from 3 months to 12 months in the future, and long-terms are basically more than 1 year or in a longer period of the time. Now what is the use of short-term forecast? Basically it is done for the scheduling of products or labors or machineries or the components. So it is more of operational forecast in a next 3 months period. Now what is mid-term forecast? So it is usually done to plan at a plant level planning like product group planning, capacity and workforce planning for next 3 to 12 months in the future, and it is also an operational in a nature. Then long term forecasts are basically done for new facilities planning or planning for the major investments in the future or new product planning in the future. And that's why long term forecasts are considered as more strategic in a nature. Now, in short-term forecast, primarily time series forecasting methods are used. In the mid-term forecast, the time series and causal effects are also considered in a forecasting process. And in long-term forecast, basically judgmental and causal effects are considered in the forecasting process. So we will see what is the causal effect and what is the time series. Now let's jump into the next topic, which is the forecasting methods. Now there are basically two types of forecasting methods. One is qualitative forecasting and second is quantitative forecasting. So we will talk about both of these. Now what is qualitative forecasting? So qualitative forecasting includes data which is interpretation based or experience based, or it is descriptive or objective in nature, and it does not have more number based scenarios. So it is more of a experience from multiple users. Now on other side, what is quantitative forecasting? So quantitative forecasting is basically a data which is number based, which can be counted or which can be measured easily. So that is the major difference between qualitative and quantitative forecasts. Now there are multiple types of qualitative forecasts like executive opinion, Salesforce, Composite, market survey, and also Delphi method. Now we'll talk one by one. So first is executive opinion. So in this method, opinion of high level managers or executives in the business are used to understand the future forecast. So someone from leadership positions like vice president, general manager, director, or CEO of the business, they usually are part of this process in the forecasting. The second is Salesforce Composite. Now we all know that sales and marketing team is more in contact with the customers and they better know what is the customer's behavior, what is the customer's pattern which is changed, and what is the customer's taste and preference that is changed. So in this method, each salesperson is actually involved in the forecasting process, and each salesperson estimates sales for his or her region or for his or her products, and then it is reviewed and aggregated for the forecasting purpose. The third is market survey. In the market survey, the input from potential customers about their future purchase plans, about their taste and preference in the future is considered into the forecasting processes. It also helps in improving product design and also for the new product introduction activities. Now the last is Delphi method. So Delphi method is basically a process used to arrive as a group's opinion or decision by taking input from panel of experts. So in each field there are multiple experts who gives an input for the forecasting in the future. Now in the quantitative forecasting, there are basically two types of forecast. First is time series and second is regression model. So in time series is basically is a sequence of multiple time points which are equally spaced or equally considered in a future, and in these sequences the observations are recorded. Now this sequence of data points can be week on week, can be month on month, or can be quarter on quarter, and henceforth. So in time series there are further multiple methods of forecasting, like some of the common methods are simple average method, moving average method, or exponential smoothing method. Now the second part in quantitative forecasting is regression model. So regression model is basically considered as a causal forecasting technique. Now what is causal? So causal forecasting technique is establishing a relationship between multiple variables. So historical data establishes some functional relationship between two variables. So if there is one independent variable, it is called as simple regression. Otherwise, it becomes multiple regression if there are multiple independent variables. So for an example, if we consider age and height of students, then it can be described as a linear regression model. Also, in the regression model, we can also consider the price of petrol and the sales of petrol vehicles, which can create a causal relationship between two variables. And based on each variable, we can do the forecasting in the future. Now, out of this qualitative and quantitative method, which method is the best? That can be one of the best question for a demand planners or a supply chain professional. Now, both these methods like qualitative and quantitative methods are often complemented or used with each other to reach at a better conclusion or a better forecast, because each of these methods have their own limitations and own scope. Now, it is very important to understand that there is no globally best or accurate forecasting method, or there is no better science to do the forecasting. So each forecasting technique has their own limitations. Now, usually when qualitative and quantitative forecastings are used, we will see that. So qualitative forecasting techniques are usually used for the short-term forecast, that is for few weeks or for few months. And in this forecasting method, usually the adequate or significant amount of historical data is not available. On other side, quantitative forecasting techniques are more likely to be successful when there is sufficient historical data available for the forecast, and quantitative forecasting is usually done for the longer period. Now, which method of this is the best? There is no right method. It is always important to consider both these methods hand in hand. Now, to prove that concept, let's assume that based on the previous year's demand for petrol and diesel vehicle, a company was selling on an average 4,000 to 4,500 vehicles. Now, if we do a statistical forecasting based on that historical data, somewhere we will end up in the future forecast of around 4,000 to 4,500 vehicles per month, without considering any other implications or any other effect on this forecast. But the biggest challenge of the statistical forecast is it does not consider external factors. Now let's assume in the same example, government is planning to increase tax on petrol and diesel vehicles, and also petrol and diesel prices are supposed to increase in future. Moreover, government has also given subsidies to the vehicle manufacturers to encourage production of electrical vehicles. So in these situations, in these multiple situations, it is bound to happen that there will be reduction in the demand of petrol and diesel vehicles. So simply we cannot rely on the statistical forecast that is coming out from the statistical forecasting methods. So in this situation, we also need to understand the opinion of experts, opinion of the market, opinion of the higher level management to do the forecasting for the future. And that is why it is important to consider both these methods like qualitative and quantitative method. So in a nutshell, you cannot rely on only statistical forecast or only quantitative forecast, but you also have to take a judgment of different people, different functions to do the forecasting, because we need to understand multiple factors in the future which will impact our forecasting process.